Good morning, students. Welcome back. This is Dr. B. Tulasi, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Vignan Nirula Institute of Technology and Sciences for Women, Palakaluru. In the last session, we have seen second unit. The contents of the second unit are the classes and objects, the nature of the object, relationship among objects, nature of class, relationship among classes, interplay of classes and objects, identifying the classes and objects, importance of classification, key abstractions and mechanisms. These are the topics which we have covered in the unit 2. And in today's session, we are going to discuss the unit 3. And the contents of the unit 3 are introduction to UML, why we model, conceptual model of the UML, architecture, classes, relationships, common mechanisms, class diagrams and object diagrams. And coming to the session, let's start the basics of the unit as usual. Let me start with the question, what is UML? And the name says it's all. UML stands for the Unified Modeling Language. Unified Modeling Language is an open standard graphical notation for system development proposed by Object Management Group. Object Management Group is a consortium of software. The notation is based on work from Grady Booch, James Ramba, Yvonne Jacobson. And UML is a modeling language to express and design documents, software particularly useful for the object-oriented designing. The language can be used from general initial design to very specific detailed design across the entire software development lifecycle. And Unified Modeling Language is a graphical language for modeling and developing of software systems. The UML diagram become a common work product for developers to use to discuss all the phases of the software development. We have seen in the first unit the phases of the software development, and the UML is used for all the phases in the software development. It means requirements gathering and analysis, design, implementation, testing, deployment and maintenance. The goal here is to model the software system before we build it. Unified Modeling Language is a modeling language that combines various approaches in a single design language, which is used to plan and create computer applications. UML is actually a combination of several notations. That means object-oriented design, object modeling technique, which is also known as OMT, and object-oriented software engineering, OOSC. The Unified Modeling Language is a family of graphical notations backed by a single meta model that help in describing and designing software systems, particularly software systems built using object-oriented style. It means by using OOPS concepts. Coming to the classes. Modeling a system involves identifying the things that are important to your particular view. These things form the vocabulary of the system you are modeling. For example, if you are building a house, things like walls, doors, windows, cabinets and lights are some of the things that will be important to you as a house owner. Each of these things can be distinguished from the other. Each of them also has a set of properties. Walls have a height and width are the properties of the wall. Doors also have a height and width and are solid as well, but have the additional behavior that allows them to open in one direction. Windows are similar to doors in that both are openings that pass through the walls. But windows and doors have slightly different properties. Windows are usually designed so that you can look out of them instead of pass through them. So in the UML, all of these things are modeled as classes. Here, a class is an abstraction of the things that are part of your vocabulary. It means, if you take an example of your house, the windows will be the classes, doors will be the classes, walls will be the classes. These are some of the vocabulary. You can use them as a classes. A class is not an individual object, but rather represent a whole set of the objects. Here, coming to the classes, we are having some terms and concepts of the classes. Here, coming to the definition of the class. A class is a description of set of the objects that share the same attributes, operations, relationships, and semantics. Graphically, a class is rendered as a rectangle. You can see it in the figure. So here, every class will have a name, attributes, and operations. There is one more optional compartment that is used for the responsibilities of a class. Coming to the names. So what names we should give to the classes? Every class must have a name that distinguishes it from other classes. Here also you can take an example. If you consider our class, everyone will have a unique name to identify yourself. If both having the same name, then you'll go for the roll number. Similarly, here also we'll use the name to identify or distinguish the class from other classes. A name is a textual string. That name alone is known as a simple name. A qualified name is the class name prefixed by the name of the package in which that class lives. Here we are having some examples. Here we are taking some simple names like temperature sensor, customer, wall. These are the simple names. If you take the qualified names, then you will have some packages. Here the fraud agent is the name of the class, but business rules is the package in which the fraud agent lives. Next one, Java AWT rectangle. In Java, we are having AWT package. In that package, we are having this rectangle class. This is how we used to give the names to the classes. A class name must be unique within its enclosing package. So the important point to note here is a class name may be text, consists of any number of letters, numbers, and certain punctuation marks. Except you can't hear the double colon, which is used to separate the class name and the name of the package. So you can't use the colon in the class name. When you use the package, you can use the colons, but you can't individually. You can't give the colon name to the class. And in practice, class names are short nouns or noun phrases drawn from the vocabulary of the system. You are modeling, and typically you capitalize the first letter of the every word in a class name, as in customer or temperature sensor. If you take the customer means C will be the capital. If you take the temperature sensor, then you can take T and S as the capital letters. This is how you need to name the classes. Next, coming to the second compartment, that is nothing but the attributes. An attribute is a named property of a class that describes a range of values that instances of the property may hold. A class may have any number of attributes or no attributes at all. An attribute represents some property of the thing you are modeling that is shared by all the objects of that class. If I take third CSE as a class name, then you can have the attributes such as student name, student roll number, student address, student days. That might be the attributes of a particular class. For example, one more example. Every wall has a height, width and thickness. You might model your customers in such a way that each has a name, address, phone number and date of birth. If you take wall as a class, then you can have the height, width and thickness of the wall. Those are the attributes. If you take the customers of your, if you have some company and you have some customers, then you can take their name, address, phone number and date of birth as the attributes of a particular class customer. So graphically, attributes are listed in the compartment just below the class name. Attributes may be drawn showing only their names. So if you see the figure, your customer is the name of the class and name, address, phone number, birth date are the attributes of a particular class. And the important point to note here is an attribute may be a text just like a class name. In practice, an attribute name is a short noun or noun phrase that represents some property of its enclosing class. Typically, you capitalize the first letter of the every word in the attribute name, except the first letter as the name. If you take here in the class name as temperature sensor means you are taking T as capital and S as capital. Here for the attribute name, if you take load bearing, so you can't take the first number as a capital, first letter as a capital. In the load bearing, you can take L as a small letter and B as the capital. This is how you need to give the names to the attributes. Coming to the next one, operations. An operation is the implementation of a service that can be requested from an object of the class to affect some behavior. In other words, an operation is an abstraction of something you can do to an object that is shared by all the objects of that class. A class may have any number of operations or no operations at all. Graphically, operations are listed in a compartment just below the class attributes. The first compartment you are having the name of the class. In the second compartment you are having the attributes of a class. In the third compartment you will take the operations of the class. You can see that in the figure. Here we are having the class name as rectangle, and as I told you that a class may or may not have any number of attributes. So here we have not taken any attributes. Operations also the same way. You can have 0 or more number of operations. So here we have taken some operations such as add, grow, move is empty. So these are the operations. So I have represented them by using the parenthesis. And the important point to note here is an operation name may be a text, just like a class name. In practice, an operation name is short verb or verb phrase that represents some behavior. It means move. It's a verb. So such type of operations. These operations might be the verbs of a particular class. Typically, you capitalize the first letter of every word in an operation name except the first letter. So here you need to have, if you take the same name, suppose move means you can take all as a small letters. If you take consider is empty, then you need to take I as a small letter and E as a capital, as same in the attributes also. Here, if you take two words as a name of the operation or attribute, the first letter should be the small letter and word of the second, from second word onwards you can take the capital letters. This is how you need to give the names to the operations. You can specify an operation by stating its signature. As I told you before, the operations will have some signatures. Here we are going to discuss that topic, which includes the name, type, default values of the parameters, and a written value also can be used in the operations. See here, for example, here I have a figure with the class name as temperature sensor. Okay, in this we are not having any attributes and we are having some operations such as reset. It's a small letter, so you can take all letters are small words, so you can take all letters as small. So this is operation, so you can specify it with the parenthesis. Next is set alarm. So here S is small letter and A is second word, first letter should be capital. Set alarm. And next is temperature. Here you can use the temperature as a signature. Value. Here value also temperature. These are the how you need to use operations and their signatures. And next coming to the organizing attributes and operations. How you are going to organize the attributes and operations. When drawing a class, you don't have to show every attribute and every operation at once. For this reason, you can elide. It means you can hide some of the properties. It means some of the attributes and some of the operations. Elide is nothing but, as we discussed, that it is nothing but it is closing or hiding some of the properties of a class. Elide means hide, meaning that you can choose to show only some or none of the class attributes and operations. You can indicate that there are more attributes or properties that shown by ending each list with a ellipsis. Ellipsis means 3 dots. You can see in the figure. You can also suppress the compartment entirely, in which case you can't tell if there are any attributes or operations or how many are therein. If you see the figure in the PPT, here we are having a class name as fraud agent. In this we are having a constructor, process, query and a helper, which are represented by using a stereotype. And we are having some operations, new, P policy, process. That means these are the operations. So here you can see 3 dots in the middle of after the process. This is nothing but the ellipsis. This is used to represent the continuity, or there are some more operations or attributes are there in the classes. This is how you need to represent. You can organize. It means you can show the elided way. It means you can't show, it's your wish to show the how many attributes you need to show, or you can hide some few of the attributes and operations. Okay. This is regarding organizing the attributes and operations. To better organize long lists of attributes and operations, you can also prefix each group with a descriptive category by using a stereotype. As I showed you there, Guillemets, they are known as Guillemets. Guillemets are indicated. It means this is nothing but the greater than and less than symbols, and 2 greater than, 2 less than symbols. Then that is nothing but the Guillemets. These are used to represent the stereotypes of any item. Coming to the next one, that is responsibilities. It means this is the optional part, and a responsibility is a contract or obligation of a class. When you create a class, you are making a statement that all objects of that class have the same kind of state and the same kind of behavior. At a more abstract level, these corresponding attributes and operations are just the features by which the class's responsibilities are carried out. Here you can see the figure in the PPT. Here the class name is fraud agent, and I have not taken any attributes and operations because I am more emphasizing on the responsibilities. So here I want to show the responsibilities. Here that is the fourth compartment, which is an optional one. Here for fraud agent I have given some responsibilities. These responsibilities can be achieved by using the attributes and operations. Now the first responsibility is determine the risk of a customer order and handle customer specific criteria for fraud. These are the two responsibilities. These two responsibilities can be achieved by using these attributes and operations defined in the class. When you model classes, a good starting point is to specify the responsibilities of the things in your vocabulary. Techniques like CRC cards, it means class relationship collaboration cards, and use case based analysis are especially helpful here to identify the vocabulary of a system. A class may have any number of responsibilities, although in practice every well-structured class have at least one responsibility and at most just a handful. It means you can't take more number of responsibilities. You can pick 1 or 2 responsibilities that should be achieved by using the attributes and operations of a class. As you refine your models, you will translate these responsibilities into a set of attributes and operations as I discussed till now that best fulfill the class's responsibilities. Geographically, responsibilities can be drawn in a separate compartment at the bottom of the class icon. Here we need to note few points regarding the responsibilities. Responsibilities are just a free-form text. See in the figure also we have written 2 statements like English like statements. Same way here also you will use for responsibilities free-form text. In practice, a single responsibility is written as a phrase, a sentence, or a short paragraph. That might be a responsibility. So there are few more characteristics of a particular class. Sometimes, however, you will need to visualize or specify these characteristics, such as the visibility of the individual attributes and operations. For visibility, as I told you, we can take the adornments like plus, minus, hash, package. Plus indicates the public, minus indicates the private, and hash indicates the protected. These are some of the visibility adornments you can use for the attributes and the operations. Language specific features of an operation, such as whether it is polymorphic or constant, or even the exceptions that objects of the class might produce or handle. There are many other features can be expressed in the YAML, but they are treated as advanced concepts. For as of now, we don't want to go with the advanced concepts for our syllabus. This is enough to know what are the how the names of the class should be, how the attributes, how the operations, and what are the responsibilities of a class. That's all. That's enough for, again, you can go for the visibility also. So for visibility means you can use the plus, minus, and hash package symbols can be used for the visibility for the attributes and operations. Till here, this is enough to go with the classes. Coming to the next topic, that is common modeling techniques. The name itself indicates common. It means for all the classes or for all the common. What are the common modeling techniques we need to apply for the classes? So here where the classes can be used means to model the vocabulary of the system. If you want to model the vocabulary of a system, it means to use the common vocabulary which was used for your system or for your problem domain. That can be used as the class names. Here, to model the vocabulary of the system, you will use classes most commonly to model abstractions that are drawn from the problem you are trying to solve or from the technology you are using to implement a solutions to that particular problem domain. Each of these abstractions is a part of the vocabulary of your system, meaning that together they represent the things that are important to users and to the implementers. And to how to model the vocabulary of a system. Here we are having some techniques or some points to be noted while modeling the vocabulary of a system. So we need to follow these steps while defining the vocabulary of a system. First point is identifies those things that users or implementers use to describe the problem or a solution. How we need to do this? Here we need to use a CRC cards. CRC cards means classes, responsibilities, collaborators. You need to use CRC cards, and by using the use case based analysis also you need to identify what are the vocabulary we are going to use in the problem domain. So you can find the abstractions by using the CRC cards and use case analysis. You need to use that vocabulary or abstractions to the class names. For each abstraction, identify a set of responsibilities. Okay, based on the responsibilities. Why these responsibilities means? Based on these responsibilities, you need to figure out the attributes and operations. So make sure that each class is crisply defined and that there is a good balance of responsibilities among all the classes. It means good balance. Every class should have one or two. But it should not be one class should have having high number of responsibilities and another class having no responsibilities at all. No, you need to have a good number of balanced number of responsibilities. This is the point you need to consider. Provide the attributes and operations that are needed to carry out these responsibilities for each class. So that's what we discussed till now. And you can see the figure. Figure shows a set of classes drawn from a retail system, including customer, order, and product. This figure includes a few other related abstractions drawn from the vocabulary of the problem, such as shipment. So here the problem is we are having the classes like customer, that is a retail system. Okay. So from the retail system, we are able to identify the customer, order, product. And here also we are having shipment, invoice, and warehouse. These are the also one solution related abstraction transactions. So which applies to the orders and shipments. So for this we have taken the vocabulary means customer, order, warehouse, shipment, product, transaction, invoice. By considering these vocabulary and we have given the name to the classes. Based on the responsibilities the class need to perform, based on this we need to take the attributes and the operations. Sometimes some classes may have attributes, some classes may not have any attributes. Some classes may have operations, some classes may not have operations. So this is shown in this is how we need to model the vocabulary of a system. Next, as your model gets larger, many of the classes you find will tend to cluster together. Clustering means grouping together, and that are conceptually and semantically related. You need to cluster the classes in such a way that they should be conceptually or semantically related to each other. You need to group those classes into clusters. And in UML, you can use package also. After clustering, you can group them and you can give the package. You can give a package name. By giving the package name and double colon, and you can give the name of the class. So this also simplifies the how you group the classes based on the package. You can identify which classes are grouped semantically or logically. So this is regarding how to model the vocabulary of a system. Second one is modeling the distribution of responsibilities in the system. How you will distribute the responsibilities. So I told you that we need to go with the balanced number of responsibilities. Every class should contain balanced number of responsibilities. So this is what we discussed in this topic. Once you start modeling more than just a handful of classes. So now we are able to know how to identify, how to take from the vocabulary of the system, how can you identify the classes. That is what we have done in the how to model the vocabulary of the system. Then now you are having good number of classes and you know how to give the names to the classes also. And now you will want to be sure that your abstractions provide a balanced set of responsibilities. What this means is that you don't want any class to be too big or too small. Each class should do one thing at least. If you abstract classes that are too big, you will find that your models are hard to change and are not very reusable also. If your abstract classes that are too small, you'll end up with many more abstractions that you can reasonably manage or understood. So you can use the UML to help you visualize and specify this balance of responsibilities. So if you take a large number of responsibilities, it is hard to change. If you take small number also, that will be a big problem. So you need to take balanced number of responsibilities. How you need to take? That can be done by using how to model the distribution of responsibilities in a system. So what are the points regarding that? Identify a set of classes that work together closely to carry out the behavior of the class. Identify a set of responsibilities for each of these classes. Look at this set of classes as a whole. Split classes that have too many responsibilities into smaller abstractions. Collapse tiny classes that have trivial responsibilities into a larger ones. Means if you have larger responsibilities, split those classes. If you have small responsibilities, merge those into larger ones. And reallocate responsibilities so that each abstraction reasonably stands on its own. So consider the ways in which those classes collaborate with one another and redistribute their responsibilities accordingly, so that no class within a collaboration does too much or too little. So if you see our college also, here every faculty should work uniformly. If one faculty working too much and the other faculty not working, that leads to the imbalance of the department. So to stabilize the department also, we need to share the responsibilities equally. This is how the classes also share their responsibilities among the classes so as to achieve the problem domain. Showing the distribution of responsibilities among the model, view, controller classes. MVC is the model, view and controller. Notice how all these classes work together such that no one class does too much or too little. So if you take the small talk, in this we are having MVC, architecture, model, view and controller. Here model means responsibilities manage the state of the model. Here the model is used to manage the state of the model. And coming to the view, render the model on the screen, manage movement and resizing of the view, and intercept user events. This is the responsibilities performed by the view. And coming to the controller, it synchronizes the changes in the model and its views. Then that will be done by the controller. These are the responsibilities given by the MVC architecture. And coming to the next the common modeling technique, that is modeling non-software things. As I told you that UML is used to give the diagrams for the software things and non-software things also. That is what here we are going to discuss now. Sometimes the things you model may never have an analog in software. For example, the people who send invoices and the robots that automatically package orders for shipping from a warehouse might be a part of the workflow you model in a retail system. Your application might not have any software that represents them. It means to represent the robots, non-software things. To model non-software things, so you need to follow few steps, designing modeling techniques to follow the how to model the non-software things. Let's see them. Model the things that are abstracting as a class. If you want to distinguish these things from the UML's defined building blocks, create a new building block by using stereotypes. As I told you, if you want to create a new building block, you need to have a stereotype that is represented by elements. Okay, to specify these new semantics and to give a distinctive visual clue. If the things you are modeling is some kind of hardware that itself contains software, consider modeling it as a kind of node as well, so that you can further expand on its structure. So coming to the important point which you need to remember is, the UML is mainly intended for modeling software intensive systems, as I discussed earlier, but it is also useful for the non-software things also, but mainly it is based on the software intensive systems. Although in conjunction with the textual hardware modeling languages such as VHDL, the UML can be quite expressive for modeling the hardware systems also. The OMG, okay, that is a consortium, Object Management Group, that is the world's consortium for software, has also produced a UML extension called SysML, intended for system modeling. Okay, here if you see the figure, here we are having accounts receivable agent and robot. So these are the two non-software things that can be modeled by using the classes. Okay, this is perfectly normal to abstract humans and hardware like robots as classes, because each represent a set of objects with a common structure and a common behavior. So this is regarding how to model non-software things. Coming to the next common modeling technique, that is modeling primitive types. So what are primitive types? Predefined data types that can be done by using these classes only. So let us see how in detail. At the other extreme, the things you model may be drawn directly from the programming language you are using to implement a solution. Typically, these abstractions involve primitive types such as integers, characters, strings, and even enumeration types that you might create yourself. So, now how you need to model this primitive types means, first point, model the thing you are abstracting as a class or enumeration, which is rendered using the class notation with the appropriate stereotype. For this also you need to use a stereotype. By using these elements, you can represent the primitive types also. If you need to specify the range of values associated with this type, you can use constraints by specifying as a constraint, as we have seen in the common mechanisms that stereotypes, tracked values and constraints. By using these constraints, you can specify the value. It means the range of the values associated with it. From the figure, you can see the figure in the PPT. From the figure, you can see that these things can be modeled in the UML as a types or enumerations, which are rendered just like classes, but are explicitly marked via stereotypes. Primitive types such as integers, it means you can use a class as int, are modeled as types, and you can explicitly indicate the range of values. Those things can be taken by using a constraint. If you want to specify the range of the int, then you can go for the constraint. By using the constraint, you can specify the range of the int. The semantics of the primitive types must be defined externally to UML. Enumeration types such as Boolean and status can be modeled as enumerations, with their individual literals listed within the attribute compartment. Enumeration types may also define operations. Here, if you see the example, here I have considered a data type as int. The values, the range of the int is from 2 to minus 2 to the power of 31 to plus 2 to the power of 31. That's what I can represent by using this constraint. And enumeration, you can use by telling as enumeration, you can use as a Boolean. For Boolean, you can use as a true or false as the values. Again, if you take the status. So what is the status of working? Enumeration as a status means, if you consider any robo means whether it is idle, working or error, that you can show by using this primitive data types by specifying them as a stereotypes. And the range of values you can specify as a constraints. Some languages such as C and C++ let you set an integer value for an enumeration literal. You can model this in the UML by attaching a note to an enumeration literal as implementation guidance. Integer values are not needed for logical modeling. Here, while modeling using classes, you need to follow some hints and tips. So, when you model classes in the UML, remember that every class should map to some tangible or conceptual abstraction in the domain of the end user or the implementer. A well-structured class should have the following properties. Provides a crisp abstraction of something drawn from the vocabulary of the problem domain or the solution domain. It means it should be a part of a problem domain or a solution domain. Embodies a small well-defined set of responsibilities and carries them all out very well. It should have some responsibilities also. Provides a clear separation of the abstraction specification and its implementation. Is understandable and simple, and extensible and adoptable. So when you draw a class in the UML, show only those properties of the class that are important to understanding the abstractions in the context. And you need to organize long lists of attributes and operations by grouping them according to their category. So by using ellipses, by giving 3 dots or category as by giving stereotypes, you can group the attributes and operations. Show related classes in the same class diagram. This is regarding the classes. We have seen how to name a class, how the operations are defined, attributes are defined, and what are the responsibilities. We have seen the common modeling techniques. Can anyone remember what are the common modeling techniques we have discussed in the classes? Here, to model the vocabulary of a class, to model the primitive data types, to model the non-software things, and to balance the responsibilities. These are the important common modeling techniques used in the classes. This is regarding the classes. We have covered all the topics of Unit 3. And let's have a quick recap what we have seen in this Unit 3. In this unit, we have discussed about what is UML, The UML is a language for visualizing, specifying, constructing documentation. Why use UML? What is the main purpose of using UML? What is a model? A model is a simplification of reality. Why do we model? And what UML is not? Objectives of the UML, history of the UML. We have seen the principles of the modeling. In that we have seen 4 points. Next we have seen the object-oriented modeling. The two most common ways are from an arithmetic perspective and from an object-oriented perspective. That's what we have discussed here. A conceptual model of the UML. Here we have discussed about the building blocks of the UML. In the building blocks of the UML, we have seen the vocabulary of the UML encompasses 3 kinds of building blocks. Those are things, relationships and diagrams. And coming to the conceptual model, we have seen the building blocks and the rules and common mechanisms. We have seen the architecture of the UML, and this we have seen about the 5 views of the architecture. And next we have seen the software development life cycle, and this we have seen about the 4 phases: inception, elaboration, construction and transition. And we have seen about the workflows also. Next we have seen the classes. In the classes we have seen about the attributes, operations and responsibilities. Coming to the common modeling techniques of the classes, we have seen the how to model the vocabulary of a system, how to model the distribution of responsibilities in a system, and modeling non-software things, modeling primitive types. This is what we have discussed in the classes. Next we have seen the relationships. In the relationships we have discussed about the dependency, generalization and association relationships. And we have seen the common modeling techniques. In the common modeling techniques we have seen about the modeling simple dependencies, modeling single inheritance, modeling structural relationships and creating web of relationships. This is what we have discussed in the relationships chapter. And coming to the common mechanisms, in this we have discussed about the nodes, stereotypes, tagged values and constraints. So in the common modeling techniques we have seen about the how to model the comments, how to model new building blocks, how to model new properties, how to model new semantics. This is what we have discussed in the common mechanisms. Next we have seen the class diagrams. In the class diagrams we have seen the what is a class diagram, and in the common modeling techniques we have seen the how to model the simple collaborations, how to model the logical database schema, and what is forward engineering and what is the reverse engineering, how our tools are supporting, and is our code supporting or not for the model which we have generated. Next we have seen the object diagrams. In the object diagrams we have seen about what is an object diagram, and next in the common modeling techniques we have seen to model the object structure. Next we have seen the same what we have studied in the class diagrams also, that is nothing but forward and reverse engineering. For all these chapters we have seen the tips we need to follow while modeling a system. And coming to the next part, which is very interesting part, that is quiz. So in the quiz, what type of relationship is represented by shape, class and square? If you see the figure, it is having 4 options: realization, generalization, aggregation and dependency. So find out the answer. If you see it clearly, you can see as generalization. Next one is, which diagram in UML shows a complete or partial view of the structure of a model system at a specified time? So here we are having 4 types of diagrams: sequence diagram, collaboration diagram, class diagram, object diagram. For this specified time, it means instance. For instance, we need to use this object diagram. Which of the following is the building block of UML? So coming to this, things, relationship, diagrams, all of the mentioned. We know that conceptual model of the UML consists of building blocks of the UML, rules and common mechanisms. Coming to the building blocks, here we are having things, relationships and diagrams. So the answer is all of the mentioned. Next, classes and interfaces are part of structural things, behavioral things, grouping things, annotational things. The answer is structural things. What is the physical element that exists at runtime in UML? The options are node, interface and activity, none of them mentioned. The answer is node. Which things are dynamic parts of UML models? Structural, behavioral, grouping things, annotational things. So, dynamic parts represents the behavioral things. Which of the following term is best defined by the statement? A structural relationship that specifies the objects of one thing are connected to the objects of another. This is association, aggregation, realization and generalization. We know that the semantic relationship is done by using association. Aggregation represents the whole part and realization is the collaboration property, and generalization means it represents the superclass and subclass relationship. So here the semantic relationship is nothing but the association. So coming to the next one, object-oriented analysis and design can be handled by one who knows UML. So if we know the UML, we can handle object-oriented analysis and design. No, the option is, we are given true and false. The correct answer is false. At conceptual level, class diagram should include operations, attributes, both operations and attributes, none of the mentioned. At the conceptual level, it is enough to have attributes only. Next, what is an object? We all know that object is an instance of class. An object includes encapsulation of data. An object is not an instance of class, all the mentioned. So, object is an instance of class. UML interfaces are used to specify required services for types of objects and program in Java but not in C, C++ or Smalltalk. Define executable logic to reuse across classes. Define the API for all classes. The answer is specify required services for types of objects. And next, how many diagrams are there in Unified Modeling Language? 6, 7, 8, 9. So the option is 9. What are they? Class diagram, object diagram, use case diagram, collaboration diagram, sequence diagram, state chart diagram, activity diagram, component diagram and deployment diagram. So we are having 9 diagrams. What are the common mechanisms of object diagram? So object diagram is used to represent the object structure. So before I giving answer, if you can answer these questions, I think you understood the class well. If you have any doubts, go back and play the videos. If you think that I'm going a little bit fast, don't worry. Then play the video slowly. It means, hope you people know how to play the video slowly. So if you don't know, I'll give you an idea. Just go to the settings in the YouTube. Click on the settings. You'll have a playback speed. You'll have an option known as playback speed. In that you'll be having normal and 1.25, 1.5. If you want to go slow, then go for 0.75, 0.5. If you want to go fast, then go for 1.25, 1.5. So by doing this, you can customize the speed according to your need. So thank you so much. Let's meet in the next session. Till then, have a safe day. Follow SMS. As usual, sanitizers, masks and social distancing till we get the vaccine for the corona. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.